Alright guys, today we're going to service the oil on our Pentruder HF saw. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks, give you the basic technique, and show you the way the guys do it when you send it back to the shop. I want to talk to you first about the oils we're going to use, the tools we're going to use, and get the saw ready for service. First, we use two different types of oil for the saw in 4 different locations. We need to make sure we service those 4 locations on the saw head. We use a red 690 oil and a black 680 oil. It's important that we don't substitute those oils for something local off the shelf. There's additives and there's parts in those oils that keep our bearings running as long as efficient as possible. So make sure you get those from the authorized service center. I like to replace my crush gasket and my drain plug whenever I service the saw. They're aluminum, they're designed to be replaced. Also, any O-rings or gaskets, go ahead and get those on order. You can order those parts individually for what you're servicing. We've got a 4-pin socket that you can order from us that makes taking the drain plugs on the back of the saw apart really easy. Using an ice pick and a hammer is not recommended. It's aluminum, we can strip stuff real easily. So, on our arm, I'd like to get into this and show you guys how to do it. I'm going to use a number 8 hex wrench and get the saw ready for service. The first thing I'm going to do is tighten my quick disconnect shaft so I don't have any clearance issues later. 4 turns to tighten it up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm ready to begin my service. I'm going to use a 15/16 inch socket. I'm going to remove my drain plug off the arm. Now what you're going to see me use here today is a really unique service fixture. This service fixture makes life really simple. You can mount this thing to the back of your truck, to your workbench, wherever you're working on your saw. It makes life real easy for anything that you might need to do in service. I'm going to let this drain. We'll be back with you in just a second. Alright, we've drained all the oil out of the saw arm. I'm going to use the service fixture and tip it back up. Now, before we fill it back up, and it's important to know, when the saw is empty, when it's brand new, it uses about 500 milliliters of oil. When we service it, it's only going to take about 450 to 475 milliliters of that red 690 oil. I'm going to use a power supply to articulate the arm, which is how we do it here in the shop. There's 2 terminal blocks at the back of your saw. The left terminal block, as I'm looking from the rear of the saw, is your ID card. Don't touch that with any power, otherwise you'll be ordering a new ID card. 12 to 24 volts. If you don't have a power supply, grab a 12-volt battery and some leads, and we can move the saw arm. The top 2 pins are your arm travel motor. The right side is the positive side if you want to articulate the saw to the right. Remember here, it's important to have that quick disconnect arm threaded all the way in, otherwise this is where you'll have that clearance issue. That's great. Now we've got clear access to our fill hole and to reinstall our drain plug. Remember, on a service, 450 to 475 milliliters to refill the saw arm. Now I'm going to replace the fresh crush gasket and the fresh drain plug after I've cleaned any debris off after removing it and inspecting it. These are aluminum threads, so I don't need to put a whole lot of torque on this thing. 15/16 inch socket and a snug fit is all we're looking for. Don't need to go crazy with that. That's got our arm serviced with some fresh fluid. Now we're going to come to the back of the saw. We're going to change the fluid on our input slip clutch, our travel arm gear, and our slip clutch using 2 different types of oil on the back of the saw. Alright, now we've moved to the back of the saw. We're going to change the fluid in 3 different locations. Our main input slip clutch, our arm slip clutch, and our travel gear. Now there's 2 different types of oil. I'm going to start with the oil that we used on the arm in this main input slip clutch, which is that red 690 oil. Remember that 4-pin socket that I mentioned earlier? This is what we're going to use on the back of the saw. I'm going to open up this main input slip clutch. Now when I pull it apart, I'm going to take special attention and detail to clean all my parts and pieces before I put it back together. Usually I clean everything as I take it apart. This is a great place to inspect or replace the O-ring on the back of this cover. Now, once I remove this slip clutch, I'm going to remove any old oil, clean it, inspect it. I'm going to use a little bit of electric contact cleaner, not brake clean, to clean this area up. We've got everything cleaned up, and now it's time to put your main input slip clutch back together. Take your slip clutch and use 12 milliliters of red 690 oil, and we're going to fill where the gear assembly sits up flush to where the gears are. And we're going to reassemble just like we took it apart. Now it's important to note that there's a dust seal on the back of this main input clutch. As I tighten this down, I'm going to bleed the air out of this assembly using a small fine screwdriver or maybe even a dental pick. I'm going to release the air as I tighten this dust cover. I'm going to give it a few turns and release the air again. And then tighten it up. Again, aluminum threads, He-Man strength isn't needed. We're just going to snug it down. Main input clutch has been serviced with some fresh oil and back together. Alright, now we're going to change the oil on our travel arm gear and our arm slip clutch. Now note, this is a different kind of oil. This is that black 680. We use the red 690 on our arm and our main input slip clutch. So I'm going to use that 4-pin wrench, the 4-pin socket, and remove the covers on the travel arm gear first. And our arm slip clutch. Now I'm going to tip this back. I'm going to drain as much fluid as I can out of these. Now I'm going to clean my O-rings on these two covers and let everything drain. Alright, now I've given this about 5 minutes to drain. Now the majority of this oil is actually up in this gearbox, so let it take its time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip the saw back, I'm going to clean everything up, but I want to show you before I do that when I refill. We're going to use about 50 milliliters of that black 680 oil on the arm slip clutch and on the travel gear. What that's going to look like is about halfway up in this assembly, we're going to fill this with black oil. Now, let's put a little bit in, let's give it some time to settle, and then we'll come back and top it off. But you'll find somewhere around 50 milliliters, give or take, will be about what you'll put back in on a service. Same on this side on the travel gear. I'm going to tip this back, clean it up, and get it ready to reinstall the oil. Alright, now I've finished cleaning everything. I've been finished inspecting everything. I've replaced this O-ring on the back of the travel gear. I've made sure my gears are all intact. Cleaned everything out that I can. Again, on my arm slip clutch, replaced my O-rings. Everything looks good. I'm ready to refill. 50 milliliters in each cavity. Again, the cavity on the arm slip clutch, the fluid is going to travel in and around through that gear assembly. So I'm going to take my time filling it, and I'm going to let it bleed. Now note as I give this a second, that fluid's actually filling the cavity and filling the gears. It's bleeding. Wait for it to finish bleeding, and we're going to fill this assembly up about halfway in this cup. I'll show you what that looks like when we're done. I'm going to fill a little bit more in, taking my time, My goal is when this assembly is full, notice it bleeding here, that we're just going to cover this brass slip clutch. That's how we know it's full. Alright guys, I'm excited we showed you how to change your oil in your Pentruder HF machine. We showed you the different types of oil to use, how to change them, the basic technique. So if you're using your machine 3 times a week, we recommend changing your oil about every 60 days. Less than 3 times a week, about every 90 to 120 days. I can tell you, you can't control your oil life, but if you change your oil and you do your preventative maintenance, you can preserve your bearings and dictate your bearing life. Give us a call. We've got a great team in customer service. Click the link below for either the phone number or the email to get your parts, get everything you need there. We've got a great team of service techs too that can answer any questions for you. The link and the phone number for them is below too. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to helping you and using Pentruder.